Giving me a notification when people. It's not giving me a notification when people enter the lobby, which is a little bit disappointing. So if I do look off into the corner, I apologize.
Yeah, you're very faint, can barely hear you.
Okay, let me try one more time. Okay, is that going to be better?
Yeah, that is, yeah.
Let me know if I drop out again. Thank you very much. Okay. Are you happy to get started?
Yes,
Dr. O'Connor.
definitely.
Fantastic. Okay. Thank you for joining us this evening. This is first in a series of opportunities for the Australian Federation of Medical Women to have a chat with some of our outstanding women leaders in Australia. And my name is Dr. Sarah Coll. I'm an orthopaedic surgeon based in far north Queensland. And tonight I have the great pleasure in introducing Dr. Manjula O'Connor, who is a psychiatrist in private practice with clinical and research interest in migrant women's mental health, family violence, and complex trauma and trauma therapy. She is an honorary clinical associate professor at the Department of Psychiatry in the University of Melbourne, an adjunct professor in the University of New South Wales Department of Social Sciences. She is the chair of the Royal Australian New Zealand College of Psychiatrists Family Violence Psychiatry Network. She is the author of a best-selling book, Daughters of Durga, and she successfully led the dowry abuse campaign in Australia, culminating in a law change in Victoria. And one more point, she is the recipient of the Victorian Government Multicultural Award, Excellence in Service Delivery in Women's Health, Australia, India Business and Community Excellence Award. She is also a distinguished recipient of the RANZCP 2023 Victorian Branch Meritorious Award. Did I miss anything? I didn't miss anything that round, Dr. O'Connor? Didn't miss any important details?
No, but I'm not sure whether it is you or my end, but you are cutting out every now and then with your videos.
Excellent. Can you just give me 2 seconds and I'll move. That's good feedback. So am I freezing? Is that what you've noticed?
Yeah.
Okay. Is that any clearer with the video?
So you are okay. I think it's stabilized now.
Yeah. So it was the video that was freezing, was it?
Yeah.
But the audio is reasonable?
Yeah, audio is great. Yes.
Okay, great. Unfortunately, where I'm located, the internet is not as reliable as one would expect. So I apologize in advance, but please, if you could let me know if there's any ongoing problems.
Sure, will do.
So I have a number of questions that I would like to ask this evening, and then if we have time, we can probably take some questions from our audience. So let me start. I guess I'm interested partly in your book, but what motivated you to delve into the topic of family violence in your practice and then also in writing?
It all started with having to present a lecture on suicide in Indian women and finding that Indian women have the highest suicide rate. There were, this was in 2005, they were second only to the Chinese women. And generally, it's generally, so the women generally have a lower suicide rate than men. So men are actually around 12 per 100,000, and women tend to be around 6 per 100,000. Whereas the Indian women, they can go from, they range a lot across various parts of India. There are some parts where the young women were 100 per 100,000. But overall, it's about 11 per 100,000. So nearly double that of Australian women. That's in India. And I was doing research around what explains this very high suicide rate, and came across this book by Professor Amartya Sen called The Argumentative Indian. And in that, he pointed to the concept that he first invented, maybe the right word, of missing women. That means women who should be alive today but are not. And he said that his estimate was that there were 25 million missing Indian women, and why and where, at what point in their life. Well, it started in utero and it went right through the life cycle. And it shook me because I seriously had no idea that it was so difficult to be a woman in India. And that, even though I am from Delhi and Indian heritage, I had not come across that within my social circles, because, society is so tiered that you don't often see people outside of your social circle. And so two things happen. Firstly, a real shock. And secondly, a sense of shame that and a guilt. And then realizing that domestic violence, dowry murders, and violence against teenage girls, they were all very significant contributory factors. I started to take interest in this and went to India, and I taught there at a university in Haridwar, which is at the foothills of the Himalayan mountains, and worked with some of the organizations over there to understand, as I said in my book, the propagation of the issues at the heart of this problem, which was patriarchy and female submission, oppression. And so I thought the place to start was domestic violence. A lot of people in India were doing work on selective female abortions.
Infanticide.
Yeah, selective female feticide. And so I thought that was not where I wanted to focus. I just wanted to focus more around adult women's experiences and what we can do around that. And that the best place to start would be in Melbourne, because the Indian population was growing rapidly, and now Indian migrants are the largest migrant group in Australia.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, the current number is about 800,000 in Australia, which is about 3% of the Australian population. And so about the same time, 2008-9, the international students were started to come to Australia from China and India. And there were quite large numbers, like 2007 or 6 or 7, there were 40,000 Indian students in Melbourne alone. all over the country. I think the numbers of international students is something absolutely huge. I was surprised, about 400,000 or some number like that. And they contribute, they contribute $80 billion to Australian economy.
Ooh. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, the Australian economy could not survive without the international students.
Yeah.
But then, of course, they have their issues as well.
And so, can you highlight how your book addresses the challenges that women doctors encounter when dealing with family violence cases?
So the biggest issue is silence and inability for women often to know that they are actual victims of family violence. So, like, I was doing a webinar today with female doctors in Brisbane. And, the coercive control that can happen starts with little things like, what you can wear and where you can go, what kind of work, but in a way that sounds loving and caring and concerned. And slowly the perpetrators isolate that person from their support networks. And so for women who are migrant women in Australia, the perpetrators isolates them from their networks back home. And even networks within Australia by, diminishing their value and criticizing them. And that brings the victim under the control of the perpetrator and perpetrators, where there is extended family system. And so in the extended family system, the victim actually has to deal with at least a husband plus his mother plus his father, his sister, maybe another brother and sister's husband and all that. And so the victim, survivor, loses their own sense of identity, their own values, their confidence to speak up. And so when a doctor comes across a woman like that, you find strange kind of injuries. Like a woman had injury on her thigh because she'd been pushed around by the husband. And when the doctor asked her, what was that bruise? She said, I fell across slipped across, fell on the washing machine, or some story she made up, which was quite implausible story. And the doctor didn't follow that up. And so same for you're an orthopedic surgeon.
Yes, I was just thinking about that. Go on.
And that, fractures of fingers and of, falls from wrists and so being pushed around. The worst one I've heard about was a woman being bashed so hard in her jaw that she had a completely fractured jaw and lost a number of teeth at the time. And she actually, it's been about 7 years and her teeth are still not fixed because it takes a lot of money for the orthodontist and orthopedic surgeons and other people, together to fix it all up, and it costs a lot of money she doesn't have. And so, if you see those kind of unexpected injuries, it's so important to check as to speak with her in a way that's
that gives her confidence to say that she's unsafe. Are you safe at home? How are things at home? Are you feeling? Do you feel okay to go home? Do you feel afraid? Do you feel fear? So those kind of questions that may open up the conversation in a way that is, broad question, but it can come down to she's a, victim of, most often they are victims of coercive control, being controlled, being isolated. And then the worst part about it is servitude, domestic servitude, like getting up in the morning from 6 o'clock, cooking hot breakfast for people, getting them morning tea, then packing their lunches, running to work, and running back home while she can sit down and rest. And the mother-in-law is all very tired from sitting all day. And so she actually gets to do all the cooking, housework. I saw this woman from Slovakia the other day, and it was exactly the same story that I had heard from my South Asian patients. It's like almost the perpetrators all learn from the same rule book.
Rule book. Go on.
And they are main purpose is to it's like breaking her back, like you would, tame the animal. So she loses her self willpower, her self-confidence, her judgments, social judgment. And by making sort of things like one man decided to make her go crazy. She'd bought apples and put them in the fridge. So he took the apples out and put them in the pantry. And she said, I put the apples in the fridge.
The fridge.
He says, I never saw them. And then he pretends to look around and he says, but they're in the pantry. And then next time he put them somewhere else, making her doubt her judgment. And it does the job. It does the trick, because the women lose their self-image, their sense of self, their social judgment, their confidence, their ability to socialize with people. And like I've got this one girl whose partner is a wealthy white businessman. She's Indian. And he comes from our richest state in our country, the wealthiest, millionaire state. And he subjected her to this kind of fooling her. This is called gaslighting, by the way. That's the technical term. Gaslighting her and making her feel so bad about herself, and telling her that you are nothing but a horrible word I don't even want to use. Raping her when it felt like his mood, and at the same time taking her away on the most expensive holidays you can imagine, skiing across Europe and doing all this wonderful trekking and exposing her to the most amazing experiences that she hadn't had. And so this is completely the kind of technique that brainwashing is used. And in POW, in prisoner of war, you are, or the intelligence agencies that use to break down their prisoner to get the intelligence out of them by giving them love and then punishment and then threats of punishment. In the end, that person is completely broken down. You break them down and then you brainwash it in a way and make them think what you want them to think. Gaslighting. And the other word for that is Stockholm syndrome. So basically, the prisoner becomes completely, loses what they were about in the end. And this woman now has left this man about 5 years ago, but she still is suicidal. She remains suicidal. And she remains confused about herself, and a sense of degradation and a sense of self-blame and a hatred. Why didn't I leave him earlier? And still loves him because the experiences that she had, and he let her run his very highly technical IT business. And she did it at a salary of a, like a 300, 400 a week, which then he would ask her to pay him in housekeeping. So, and she still loves him every now and then. Thank God, it is much less now, but the flashbacks keep coming back, and triggers happen all the time. So these people this is the most worst kind of abuse that can happen. And for South Asian women, the kind of abuse happens in terms of becoming so servile to their extended family and cutting off from their own parents, that they may feel suicidal, and they feel they may not act on it, but the suicidal thoughts are very strong. And that is where they're so vulnerable to, taking their life. And research coming out from India shows that divorced women, and divorce rate is very low, 1%, or actually, so it's a lot higher. They pretend it's low. It's now about 4-5%, but the separation rate is very high. So they remain separated, but they don't call themselves divorced because the marriage is such an important seminal thing, that the women actually are better off with their mental health as compared to married women.
The separated women.
Yeah, which is the reverse for Western countries.
Oh, interesting. Oh, I didn't know that one.
Yeah.
And so when you say silence is the issue, and then you say finger fractures. And then you said, ask them if they feel safe. So obviously, as a hand surgeon, I'm interested in finger fractures. But are you trying to say that these smaller fractures, small bone fractures, are more common? Is that what you're trying to tell me?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So twisting the fingers.
Yeah. Yeah. Right. Is more common.
Oh, yeah. Easy. Like, it's easy to do with a smaller person than you, isn't it?
And so then when you say silence, you're implying that your question, are you safe at home, is that a nice way to start the conversation? Is that your preferred way? Do you get a bit of an inkling and then?
So if you get a bit of an inkling about that this fracture looks a bit wrong, it's really, why would you get a finger fracture for no good reason? That it's important to check, is everything okay at home? Did this happen to you? Did someone do this to you? Or how did it happen? So let her know that you are suspecting it. And that, I can see Magda is about to join us. And Magda will tell you that we have a research that shows that women want to be asked.
Oh, really? So
yes.
Can you just describe that a little bit more?
So research done by Kelsey Hegarty at the Melbourne University shows that women want to be asked by their GPs. They would prefer, they feel the safest with their GPs and doctors generally.
Generally, really?
Yeah. and that they would prefer that someone ask them rather than pretend it's not there. That you're not going to create any anxiety in a patient by asking, did someone do to you, or did this happen, or are you safe at home, or do you have any sense of fear at home, or even a broader one, how are things at home?
Yeah, that's an easier one for me.
Yeah, that's an easy one. And but if you saw someone with a fractured finger, and you'd ask, wouldn't you, how did it happen?
The mechanism of injury, yes, I do spend a bit of time trying to establish that and trying to establish its plausibility. So it's not very far to go to how are things at home.
How things at home, and if you suspect she gives you a hint, then you can go into, did someone do this to you, or was it actually an injury? Because this patient of mine who fell down across, and she said the story she made, she fell down and fell onto the washing machine. The husband had pushed her and she'd fallen onto the coffee table. And that's how she got the bruise on her thigh, which easily could have been a fracture. She was so surprised that her GP accepted her explanation. And
yes, I find that challenging as well.
Yeah.
At what point do you step in and say, this doesn't sound plausible?
And I would say that if you suspected it and you said, that doesn't sound like, that doesn't sound right. Just like, you can say it in a hesitant way that allows the patient to come back at you and say, and you can say, you can share with me if you wish. So, there are many ways of stating it that makes the woman feel safe to know that you will believe her. So that is the biggest issue. The women want to share it, but they want to know that you will believe it.
Can I take you on to my next question? And this leads on from that. How can women doctors navigate the delicate balance between professional duty, patient confidentiality, and advocacy for these victims?
Yes, and so that's what I, in the end, ended up doing, because when you are seeing patients after patients with similar problem, it's almost like, you start to think like, do I just put a Band-Aid and keep going, or do you step outside the clinic?
Yes.
Now, because the stories were so horrific, and the women themselves were so angry at their perpetrators, because most of these women that I'm talking about in my book had left their perpetrators and extended families, and they were so angry at what had happened to them, shocked, afraid, but also wanting the world to know what's happening to them. And I just thought one day, why don't we make a small documentary with it? And I contacted the SBS reporter, Luke Waters. And actually the documentary happened because the patient who inspired me to do that was an international student. And she said that she was beaten up by her sister-in-law and her husband because she didn't want to share her income as a nurse with them. Sure. And and that they had told her that she hadn't brought enough dowry and this money belonged to them and so on. And then she said to me, you'd be surprised how prevalent this problem is amongst our students. And so, and sure enough, it was very, I was seeing women coming in with panic attacks and acute depression and PTSD going through this. And so I said to her, would you be willing to share this story? She said, I can, but I don't want to, I want to appear incognito. And so I contacted Luke Waters. I don't know why I knew him. I think he might have contacted me previously about some other issue. So I said to Luke, would you be interested in doing a documentary, a brief 10, 15-minute documentary on dowry abuse? And at that time, nobody in Australia had heard about that word. And it got his interest. And so she appeared, and then that started the ball rolling. And it gave me idea that women are willing to speak out and educate the community. And they desperately wanted to do that because they felt so powerless in front of those perpetrators. So the media were interested, the women were interested, and I thought the public health duty is bigger than the worrying about the privacy. The women were not identified as, they were de-identified, but their stories were in the paper, their names were changed, and most of the women who would speak out were those who felt safe that their perpetrators would not look at this story. And they felt like, you know, it will not, the perpetrator will not harm them, will not reach them. And so, yeah, but it was, so we did, you know, started to do stories, but at the same time, and I also published papers in our journals of what I was saying. And then because the problem was looking acute, and because India already had a law to ban dowry in India from 1961, so I thought, why don't we get something similar happening in Australia? And started a petition to be signed by the community. And about that time, Premier Ted Baillieu, he was a premier for a short time, like about, I think, a year and a half or 2 years before he resigned in Melbourne. And his advisor contacted me and said, Premier would like to meet you and some of your girls, some of your patients. And so about 4 of my girls and I went to meet the Premier, and they told him stories, and there were about 4 other ministers in the room, and they were all very moved by it, and the Premier said he will do everything he could to help. And so he actually tabled the petition in the Parliament for us, which then got the media even more interested. And about the same time, the Age editor rang me and said, we are here to support you. And that I know, I lived in India, I know it's a problem. Because in India, dowry murder used to happen every hour, but now it's every 90 minutes.
Oh, okay. Wow.
So about when I started working, it was 7,700 women per year were killed in dowry.
What do you mean by dowry? Yeah, what do you mean by dowry murder? What can you define what you mean?
It is about husband's dissatisfaction.
Yes.
With the amount of gifts and the quantity of gifts brought.
Yes.
and repeated domestic violence as a result of it, because she refuses to ask her parents for more.
More. Wow.
And
okay.
then the easiest thing for them to do was, when she was cooking, to set her alight. So these were the burning. There was a book, Brides Are Not for Burning. And so that's why I was so afraid when I saw it, when I came across it. I thought, this is going to not stop here. That the men who are the grooms, who are called the non-resident Indian grooms, settled in Australia, have got very high groom value. They have very high dowry value. They are going to offer the parents, their daughter, an amazing life in Australia.
A residency, right?
As a result of Australian residency.
Yes.
And that artificially increases their value. And then they have the power to extort more when she comes over.
Okay.
Or even on the day of the marriage.
Goodness.
Like one of the girls who got murdered in Melbourne in 2015, her father worked with us to get this petition through into law. He actually, her husband asked him on the day of the wedding, in spite of the fact that they've furnished their whole house with white goods, furniture, anything you can imagine, and cash already given, something like $10,000. He wanted, the groom's father said to the bride's father, we want $12,000 cash, otherwise the wedding is off. On the day of the wedding, when the invitations have gone out to 500-600 people, and everything, hotel is paid off, because Indians have big fat weddings. We are all very, and there's great fun weddings, but who pays? So, and so her father said, I can't get $12,000 today. And they said, well, the wedding's off. They said, it was such a stigma and shame. He couldn't bear it. So he said, okay, I'll get it to you in 2 or 3 days' time. And so they agreed to have the wedding. But after the marriage, she came here, and there were constant demands for money, more money, more money, more money. At every function, every festival, every birthday, whatever, they've had to go and deliver gifts to her family. And so that went on for a long time, and with her beatings, and she decided to leave him. And she then, when he told her come back, she said no, and so he killed her. So that was the very clear dowry murder. And the coroner's inquest noted that in their questions, but never actually gave it any value in their summation. So it was clear that there are a lot of work in education that needs to be done, and the laws. And so, so that's how we got the law. And that's how I stepped outside of the consulting room into the public arena, but not without backlash from the patriarchs of the society. Who are you to speak about? There's no problem. You're just doing it for your publicity. It's all fake. And a petition against me circulated to all the MPs
Mm-hmm.
before it became law, because it became law in the next government under Daniel Andrews.
Goodness.
And so a lot of work to stop this from happening. But but the story was out, like it is a big story in every newspaper, dozens and dozens of stories. So, you know, how many women can be like if you see one woman in the media, that means there must be hundreds more.
Yes, of course, of course.
It's a tip of the iceberg.
Yes, of course. I'm going to indulge myself in one more question before I open it up to our listeners, if that's okay with you, Dr. O'Connor. Thank you. So on that note, that seems to have been a theme of our chat this evening. What advice do you have for women doctors who may want to advocate for policy changes or community initiatives related to family violence? So what advice do you have for us on this advocacy journey that you've been on?
The first thing is, if you really want to do it, you have to join hands with an already existing community organization.
Yes.
So you actually get to know what the issues are at the ground level. Because what you're seeing in the in your practice is the sharper end of it. But you want to know what's the broader issue there out in the grassroots. And so that's what I did. I joined the Australia-India Society of Victoria and started to attend community meetings. I would be the only doctor there, along with, you know, every other professional group.
Oh.
Yeah, because, you know, doctors don't go outside and meet people who are less than.
Interesting. Yeah.
Someone said to me, you know, you are the only psychiatrist or doctor who comes out. Why is it that other doctors don't do the same?
Okay, so, that's good to know.
Yeah, so it's important to look like others and talk like others and be at the community events that, you know, we would not deign to attend because they're not academic enough or they're not influential enough or things like that. And that's how then you start to get invited to do talks for, you know, community. They start to recognize what you are doing and share your work with them, your ideas. And so at the Australian Society of Victoria, I started the very first task force against domestic violence as a community group in 2009. And so the Consul General at the time thought it was such a great idea. And in fact, the President of India even mentioned it in his citation for the organization that Australia-India Society of Victoria Task Force Against Domestic Violence is raising human rights for Indian women in Australia. And but the same organization turned against me because I was too much in the media and shaming the community, naming and shaming the community. So that was a pushback. And so I had to leave them. I said, I'm resigning, I'm leaving. And then I said, no, okay, I won't resign, I'll stay and I'll work with you. And then the president of AISV said to me, no, you're not coming back, you've resigned. So I then started with two other people, my partner, Jonathan Harrison, and another friend. We co-founded Australasian Center for Human Rights and Health, and we have achieved a huge amount in the last 12 years. I have pulled in $1 billion worth of funding and created numerous educational programs And the last one, I've done 3 community participatory theaters where we bring the community together and create the skits that we perform in front of the community in an interactive discussion session about the skits. And so we're now making a documentary out of that. That documentary will be a 45-minute documentary with educational tools for discussion amongst community groups. And it's an amazingly culturally accurate, nuanced, sensitive way of targeting the issues and needs of the community. And it's so good. It would be the perfect thing for Aboriginal communities.
Yes, yes.
And for other migrant groups. Yesterday, I was in a meeting with Families Safety Victoria, and one Somali woman said, our community is getting no funding for any education, and FGM is so rife. And I said to her, you know what? Your community will benefit from doing community theater. And so I gave it the card, and hopefully, but it's a very expensive and time-consuming educational method. So that's why I'm making a documentary. So we don't have to do it in person, but it captures everything that people need to know. And we will be screening it at the Indian Film Festival in June.
Oh, so, well done. Congratulations.
Thank you. We're very excited about that. Yeah, very excited about the project, and government gave us $300,000 for it.
Oh, congratulations. That's just absolutely wonderful. I'm so excited to hear that.
Yeah, so there is amazing beauty in stepping out of your concern into advocacy. It's very fulfilling. It's so rewarding. And to see the social change around you that is happening, which is what we want to do with family violence, to create that inclusive social change.
Well, we have got some time, if that's okay with you, Dr. O'Connor, to take any questions from our audience. If you could do the traditional hand raising, that would be very helpful. And but I have more questions if there isn't any from the floor.
I think Magda had a hand up.
I'm trying to get my hand up.
Oh, here we go. Oh, Desiree, Dr. Yap is going to ask us a question.
Magda, I think Magda got in first. Magda was first.
Oh, that's okay. I was going to say, Manjula, just so inspirational, just amazing, and congratulations. What was it that gave you the confidence that community theatre was the way to address this in a way that doesn't make your audience uncomfortable? I mean, to bring everybody together, it's men and women of the community together listening to these stories. How did you design this, and how did you come across the idea?
So this was when I was doing mental health leadership program. I was a student of the program at Melbourne Uni in 2009 and 10, and with Harry Minnis, we decided. I said to Harry that the reason I was there was because I do want to get into advocacy against domestic violence in the Indian community, because I do want to see a social change. And then we decided to do a project and working around the methodology of breaking the silence, because the silence was so profound for Indian women at that stage that hardly anyone went out to get help. I mean, silence was profound across every community in 2010. Like, we now take it for granted that people will come out for help. But at that point, it was like absolute profound silence. And I, in my naivety, thought that, you know, good people, all good people in the community will want to change like I want to change, see a social change. Not knowing who in the hell wants to give up their power. So anyway, so we were sitting around and trying to figure out a methodology. And we came up, I don't know, somebody said around theater, and we came up with Armenia. She was a psychologist there, interested in suicide amongst Indian students. We came up with this idea about theater, and then it became, there's a precedent for it. It's called Forum Theater, that was started in 1925 by Paulo Ferreiro in one of the South American, Brazil, to advocate or bring out the issues of racism and oppression in the communities. And so we decided to take that forum theater concept. And when we started researching, we found that in India, they were already using it in a huge way in Calcutta for the previous 10 years. And so we thought that sounds like it will be acceptable. It'll be a great thing to do. But the next thing was how to do it. So we first decided to do it only with women. No men. We are so scared of men, what they'll do. So not only women. And it was a little bit difficult to recruit, but it happened. And we had 170 women who took part in 5 different performances. And we had about 8 women who were the actors, who were trained by a theater director, who went across to Calcutta and got trained in forum theater. And so she came back and she trained these women, and a lot of it was silence in body images only. And then getting the community to articulate what they're seeing and recording everything, pre and post workshop questionnaires, and analyzing thematic analysis, and published those papers. And it broke the silence. It's absolutely broke the silence. But the backlash for me was I was never allowed to enter that Sikh temple again.
There you go.
So no Sikh temples now let me in.
Yeah. That's the price sometimes of advocacy. Yeah.
And so that was our very first project in 2010-11. Then we became a bit bolder because people started to talk about it. So then we did a second one in 2016 with men and women. And that was even more popular. We had about 200 people and 15 men and women that were trained as actor volunteers, and 200 people. And we filmed that, and it's a 40-minute video film that we have on our website, our NGO website. And then this one, the third one, we then got the money from the government because there was 7 women killed themselves in a row in Melbourne of Indian origin. And when the police went to investigate, most of them had domestic violence. So the government gave us money to continue to educate, but also to focus on dowry abuse and the law around it and the financial abuse. And so we've done that now for 3 years. It is always hard to recruit men as audiences but we did have 5 or 6 men as actor volunteers, trained as actor volunteers, and 15 women. So we had a big team this time, and we thought we had an embedded film crew and an embedded evaluation team. So basically, we think this will be a sustainable across the nation model for all migrant communities, but particularly for Aboriginal communities. I think it's absolutely the right thing for them, and for FGM. Really needs a lot of work there. But whether the issue there is profound silence, profound. And the patriarchal dominance there is profound. So, so it's like, you take 1 step forward, 2 step back, 2 step forwards, 1 step back. It's a very like that kind of a journey.
It's a dance.
It's a dance, but we are making an impact, because 1800 Respect announced 2017 that Indian women were their biggest callers after the mainstream local born women. So we know more women are coming out for help, that we have done something here. So, and it's only the Indian women migrant group. Other migrant groups are suffering the same. They're not coming forward.
Desiree, would you like to ask a question? Thank you, Magda. That was great.
Yeah, thank you for a really interesting presentation. I was actually wondering whether, given we're recording this, Dr. O'Connor, whether you'd be happy that I could share a link to some of the younger, feminist groups that are on Facebook that don't actually necessarily, connect with some of the things that are more longer standing, because, I think this has been a fantastically interesting presentation, and I think it's underappreciated what work is actually going on and what has gone on.
That's right. That would be an honor for me to, have the younger women look at this and to say that it inspires them or it impacts their practice in any way. That would be an absolute
them to advocacy. That would be great. Thank you, Desiree. That's a great idea. And Sarah, can I get you to ask a question?
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much for organizing this and for your interesting presentation, Dr. O'Connor. I'm dialing in from Brisbane, Queensland, and we have a president's chat here as well. And it's really interesting how one of the first women that I interviewed for this was a woman of Korean descent. And she has actually done the same thing as you, where throughout her whole journey, at the end, she decided to do theater and advocate and teach other, Southeast Asian the people with the Southeast Asian background. So that's really interesting. Like you say, it really goes for all cultures. The other thing I was interested in is you mentioned the backlash you received as from the men in the Indian community. I think it's even harder for women with a different cultural background to discuss this. Do you have any tips for women who are not Indian, how to deal with the backlash of the Indian men who might not be happy with us advocating for their women?
Yeah, it's a very tough question, and I don't know the answer, because and that's why they are so worried is for naming and shaming from other people, you know. And so, yes, it's very hard. And one of the things we do in our theater is that we don't invite other communities into this as audiences or even as actors, because that is to avoid the voyeurism aspect of it. So you can't, you know, I can say this thing is the most terrible thing that's happening to our women, and people listen to me because it's my issue as well.
Exactly. Yeah.
But if you stand up and say dowry abuse is terrible, people are going to say, what's your credibility here? You know, that's the problem. And I don't know what the answer is, except to say that you can certainly do it with, like if you had 3 other women who were Indian and you were part of that group, you could do it like that. So you are like, you have the insiders on side with you.
So it would be best to reach out to other Indian women or other Indian doctors and work with them.
And work with them. Yeah. And that, yeah. So because, you know, I'm an insider, and I have, for whatever reason, because I've been a psychiatrist for a very long time, and a lot of people know me, like I have kind of a credibility that most people don't question now. But they did when I first started.
Yeah, I feel like you've earned that.
Yeah, to say, who are you to speak on behalf of the Indian community? Because we are the patriarchs. We know more than you would ever know. Right? Yeah. So it's a tricky space. Yeah.
I'm mindful of the clock ticking, but I'd love to hear from Laxmi.
Sure.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, Dr. O'Connor. I've been following your work for quite some time. I'm a senior psych registrar in Melbourne.
Oh, thank you.
Excellent.
Yeah, it's just wonderful to be a part of this conversation. And I guess not a question, but more a comment or sort of semi-question of hopefully hoping to fellow soon, but how can I also be a part of this sort of advocacy space and build my credibility being, you know, a registrar? How can I get more involved?
So yeah, you can join. Look, it's not easy. Like, don't imagine that you as a registrar are so busy with your time constraints and the burden on you and the shortage of staff, and you have to study and all of that. And whereas, you know, I only see patients 2 days a week, and rest of the time I do this 5 days. I work 7 days a week. My daughter is fully grown up. She doesn't need me. And that's why I can devote so much time to doing this work late at night, anytime, weekends, whatever. But if you want to, you can certainly come, and you can be a part of our next program we are doing on the 2nd of June and see what it feels like to be in a face-to-face meeting on an educational interactive workshop. Do you belong to IMDA by any chance? India?
No, not yet.
Okay, why don't you join it, because they are hosting it.
Yeah.
We have a space for 40 doctors in holding in queue. And if you want to, then I can train you as facilitator. And if we get the next lot of funding for mental health, advocacy, and education, then, you know, I can train. You can be one of our facilitators. We can train, but mindful of time requirements.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Thank you, Dr. O'Connor.
Oh, you're welcome.
That's a marvelous.
Have you?
Thank you.
Marvelous contribution, Laxmi. Thank you. And Magda, did you want to ask our final question for this evening before we let Dr. O'Connor go?
Oh no, I think we've heard from you know, everybody. You know, I just really grateful, Manjula, that we've had you finally on AFMW's chat. But I also just wanted to comment on how marvelously culturally sensitive your approach has been. As you said, you know, avoiding the voyeurism from other cultural groups. It's really important, and I think that's a significant difference between the program that you've created and some of the other programs that exist, which we're talking about cultural sensitivity, but we don't really demonstrate it as well. So well done on that, Manjula.
Yeah, but you know, it's a very, like I keep saying, it's such a minefield. Like you step in there and you don't know which way the next mine is going to be that's going to amputate you, you know. It is like that a little bit. So you just have to take the risk and be prepared. And if you're building your reputation and want to get into private practice, be careful. So, but it does work on the other side as well. Like, you know, people know what your expertise is. And so, you know, people come, they're attracted to you. And so it works both ways. Like you gain some, you lose some.
And on that note, I think we've all learned a lot this evening. And one of the things that I've learned is that the women want to share and they trust us as doctors to listen. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. I think Magda will tell you that is the case, isn't it?
Yes, it is. It's they want to be asked, and they want to be believed also.
That's the key. Ask but believe them. That's the point. If you ask and then don't believe and make them feel like, you know, did it really happen? And then they start to feel embarrassed and they run away. Sort of climb up.
Excellent. So thank you, everyone. Thank you for coming along this evening, and thank you for being our first speaker, Dr. O'Connor. And I look forward to catching up with you, hopefully one day, face to face.
Yes, definitely come to Melbourne and join one of our workshops.
Can do. Thank you, everyone.
Take care. Bye. Have a great evening.